Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask all of you, um, what, how intelligent is nature? Because most people don't think nature can do much more than grow leaves and give us pretty colors. Or, we can enjoy the beauty of nature. And so is the beauty of nature what it's about? I mean, you know, maybe nature is smarter than we've given it credit for in many ways. Some of us can understand that there's smartness out there too. But how smart is it? So to answer that, I'm so glad we're talking again with the author of Why Can't We Be More Like Trees, who are they are the ancient masters of cooperation, kindness, and healing. Judith Polich, welcome back. I
Thank
can't
you.
remember if
Thank
it's
you.
Polich or Polish, but
Polich, yeah.
Polich, yeah, I got it right. So I'm so happy to talk with you because you're very embedded in nature and can talk on a lot of different levels about it. And even before we started recording, you and I were talking about the intelligence out there and how vast it is. And you said something about aliens. Can you repeat that?
So,
And
but I said something about what?
aliens.
It's an alien type of intelligence to us. I mean, obviously, the plant world has some type of cognition and something we might call smarts. I like the word smarts or intelligence, but it's so different. It's so alien to our way of perceiving that we tend to, it's easy to discount it. And then, people will say things, well, how can they have any intelligence or cognition? They don't have a brain or a spinal cord.
Well,
So
and
obviously,
even, excuse me, but even the way we talk about animals is that most
right,
people think animals are only interested in food and mating. And that's about it.
right. And so what we have to deal with is our own anthropocentric attitude and perception, because we're saying things through our limited sensory modalities, and they are limited. I mean, we know they're limited. In fact, plants have a lot more senses in some ways that we do. They perceive information far differently. Uh, they can just with regard to light, they can process light and understand light in ways that we cannot. And obviously, they have other senses that are different. You can say, well, they can't smell, but they can feel vibration, and vibration is how lots of animals can smell and hear. And so we'd have to kind of look at it outside of our own limited lens, basically.
Right. I think they can smell actually.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they,
I try to be well bathed when I go into the forest, so they don't have to worry
know
about
they
my
can.
smell.
We know they can smell because they emit over 2,000 different scents. And those scents are chemical formulations, different terpenes that can be sensed by other plants. So if a plant is being attacked by some bug or something, they're going to send out a certain chemical scent that other plants will pick up, and then they're going to send toxins into their leaves. So those bugs aren't going to like those leaves. So obviously they have senses, they have ways of
Right.
communicating that information. And that's a type of intelligence, but it's not an intelligence that we can easily process or understand.
Well, that's because we don't see it. There's so much interest in the world about caring for animals and animal safety and and there's some about certainly about trees and forests, but it's not as easily understood because there's not as much empathy with
That's right. That's right. I mean, if plants had little beautiful little eyes that looked out at us, and little kids would say, "Oh, look at that cute little plant." like they might a bunny or something else, obviously there would be a different sense of connection, and that's a problem. Because we don't see them as having the same kind of value.
Right. And when you say to people, go hug a tree, it's just, wait a minute, that's just bark. I don't know what I'm hugging.
Right. And, you know, I mean, and um, I think we have to open ourselves up to other ways of looking at the world that we live in than the rather constrained, limited, linear world that we tend to see and analyze. I think it's much bigger than we can imagine.
Well, there have been many experiments, scientific experiments, to show how plants think and respond to stimuli
Right.
and have memories, and and so where are memories held?
Boy, I know. I mean, um, we know they learn and we know they can store memories. Scientists have determined in experiments over and over again, they can store memories for 30 to 60 days, which is a pretty long time in a plant's life. And where they stored, we're not sure. There's some thought that in the roots of the plant are these things called meristems, and that they may be part of their learning cognitive process, if you can call it that. And they have the same, neurotransmitters that we have actually. So they may be, things may be much more dispersed. Obviously, they can't have it wouldn't make any sense for a plant to have a brain like we do, because it's like if you're a broccoli and somebody comes along and cuts off your head, then it's not going to do you much good to have all of your intelligence in that broccoli head. So they have what scientists believe a type of dispersed or sensory modalities, as well as ways of perhaps learning, storing memory, that are more dispersed within their structure.
And maybe the true life of the plant world are their roots,
Mhm.
because as you said, they can be destroyed so easily. What's above the ground,
Mhm.
it can, there's all kinds of predators of plant
Right.
life.
There's lots of herbivores in the world,
Right.
including us. So,
And maybe that's good for balance too, because if we didn't have herbivores, and I think that happened, was it in Yellowstone that they took
yes,
the wolves away?
the way, and it changed the ecology of the system, and everything got out of balance, and even the streams weren't as healthy because we have to have all parts of a functional system for the system to work. That's something we could study a lot more.
Right. And it's so important because then they had to bring the wolves back,
Right. And
because the wolves then killed off uh, the herbivores.
kept the population at a sustainable level so the plants could grow at a sustainable level. So the streams were healthier, everything was healthier. Duh.
It's fascinating how we don't need so many herbivores around. Or we need more, I mean, I think it's a balance that we need enough of them, not too many and not too few.
Right, and there's lots of different studies done about what keystone species are in nature. It's kind of a big term these days about a species that is really important to keep the ecosystem whole. So we're learning a lot, people are studying a lot, and we still have a long way to go before we understand what really happens in a plant or forest community. It's a relatively new field of study in terms of looking at it with the technologies we have now and getting a sense of what's going on under the ground, because we can only see above the ground.
I'm thinking about information, and plants give us information. That's why we eat them,
Mhm, mhm,
because each plant has different information for our body to sustain itself.
mhm.
And maybe it's more important to eat plants than animals, because when you eat animals, you're only eating animals that have eaten plants.
Right.
And so it's like secondhand, secondhand information.
Secondhand information. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard to say. I mean, everybody's body is different. Some people feel they do better with animal protein. Some
No,
people
it's
don't
not. Yeah,
do
it's
with it, you know?
right. That's fine. I'm thinking about the intelligence, the information in all kinds of vegetation, which is why we need a varied diet. But also, I'm thinking of the information, for instance, in Bach flower remedies,
Mhm.
that they give us information that have so much to do with our psyches and our and why is that so? How can plants hold that kind of information of us to exist on psycho-emotional levels?
I don't know. I mean, there are whole books that can and should be written about the healing qualities of plants. And when you talk about Bach remedies, I mean, you're getting from the physical into the metaphysical in a certain way. And of course, science doesn't like to research those kinds of things very much.
Right,
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't work, right? That we know it intuitively that it works, right?
right. And that's the point, is that again we come back to this whole world of information that plants, trees communicate. That's what the fungi are there for, is
Mhm.
to pass the information from tree to tree. And
Yeah, I think the fungi are pretty smart. And I think we know almost nothing about fungi, right? There's a few books written here and there's a little bit of research done there. But here's this whole extraordinary kingdom, much of which is also invisible to us, that performs all these roles in our world. And while we couldn't exist without plants, of course, we probably would have a hard time existing without fungi because they break everything down and convert it into something else. Otherwise, we just have all this debris piling up all over the place. So we really need these kingdoms that we hardly understand. And fungi demonstrate another type of alien intelligence, and they obviously have some method of communicating with plants and exchanging information, getting carbon sugar in exchange for the minerals that they may give plants. They filter out toxins for plants. They'll deliver water. They're just almost a part of one system. But they've developed this long, long ago. I mean, shortly after plants evolved, it seemed they had a sort of symbiotic relationships with fungi. So it's very ancient.
yeah, I just wonder how um, many planets probably are so abundant that don't have as much human interruption.
We can hope.
Right. Well, maybe we'll do a better job here because there's so much. I mean, and let's look at plant life in the ocean and what that's all. I mean,
And
it's
it's
so
where it all
fun to
came from. Everything came from the ocean when plants gradually made their way up to the shore and, started to put their roots into the rocky shores, break down the rocks, make soil so that, later animals could come out and live on the outside the ocean. But plants led the way in every step in our evolution here.
but in combination with all kinds of, for instance, insects and how insects are a big part of the plant world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As predators.
Well, not only,
And other ways.
sure. Well,
And
everybody,
pollinators, I mean,
yeah,
so,
exactly.
right, so we love you, we hate you, it's all part of our being a part of a larger cycle of life.
It's interesting how vulnerable humans are to nature and to insects, and uh, we're trying to cope with it in not necessarily sophisticated ways. because we don't always make friends. Like, for
We
instance,
don't always make good friends with our insect buddies. Yeah, but boy, they're essential to all life as anything else. And
right, and bees, for instance, are so important, and yet I don't like them only because I'm allergic to them.
mhm, good reason to be careful, right?
Yeah, and so, and then there are people who just hang out in among beehives and might
Hmm.
have dozens of bees on their body at any one time.
And
And
they're not getting stung,
right.
right?
So
Right.
what is that about? That's really cool.
They have a communication with the bees, and if I've watched beekeepers work. I've even did a little bit in my youth, and it's quite amazing. And people fall in love with the complexity of life in a beehive and how, and so there's a certain relationship that happens between traditional beekeepers and their hives. I've even heard wonderful stories about how when their beekeeper died, the hive went off. They left. I mean, so there's obviously some kind of deep connection that we can't fathom,
That's beautiful.
some love between species.
Well, that inspires me, actually. Maybe I should go hang out among some
Just
beehives.
take your medication with you.
I know, I know. But I think if I just have a friendly attitude, maybe that'll help. It's fascinating how important, you know, there's so many humans who are designed, who are built in this life to support these natural habits of, bees and other insects and, um, and trees and, all kinds of the diversity that so many humans are drawn to, and so many, unfortunately, because we don't live in nature as much, have no idea about.
And that's the problem. And people who are disconnected from the natural environment um, kind of lose sight of how integral it is for our well-being. And can even develop that syndrome like plant blindness, where they just don't even see plants anymore. They just come kind of blur out there. They're just much more focused inwardly. They don't have a connection with the rest of life. And I think that's a horrible, tragic state.
They just see a lot of green around them, etc., or they
They
can
don't even
admire,
hardly see it.
well, they can admire flowers.
They
Um,
might
yeah, they might,
or not.
but
They
it's,
are disconnected, completely
yeah.
disassociated and connected with the vital life around them.
Well, I was reading in your book about forest bathing
Hmm.
and how wonderful that sounds. And I think what that means to me is that when you're in a forest, there's so many different sensations you can experience. And the idea is to be open to whatever you feel or sense, how it draws you to behave within the forest.
Yeah, there really aren't a lot of rules other than kind of staying quiet and spending time quietly walking in a forest. I mean, this is a practice that originated and still practiced throughout Japan and some of their beautiful ancient forests. And researchers started studying it because they found that people changed. They became much less stressed, much calmer, and in many ways healthier. And so they started examining why was that so? If they took a walk for an hour or two in the forest, what was going on? And they found a number of things. They found that the bodies were distressed. There was less cortisol, less of those aggressive kind of um, fear-based hormones in the body, the kind of fight kind of thing that is built into our systems, can become habitual. So that was dampened. And so as stress was reduced, blood pressure was better, people slept better, things like that. But there was actually even more going on. Remember, we were talking about the sense that trees give off, like the piney smell and things like that, and there are
Sure.
thousands of them. And those are called terpenes. They're chemical formulations. So when we start breathing those in a deep forest, they have an effect on our immune system, they found, and our body starts generating more killer cells, anti-cancer cells. And so as a reaction, so our immune system is enhanced by walking in a forest regularly, and that's been quite documented. So we sleep better, we are better, we're healthier, and there's even more. Something happens with our minds too. Our minds start to slow down, we're always, we have, the basic mind that I'm using now that you're using as our executive mind. It's our mind that is the planning, processing, talking, chatting, the engaged mind, doing a million things a minute, right? And that slows down, that stops, that is dampened by the longer that we are in a forest or quiet, natural environment. And as that happens, the other parts of our brain, what's called the default mode becomes more prominent. And that's the more holistic part of our mind. It's the part that we are in when we're in a meditation state. So that surfaces, and then we can see and feel and sense more the interconnection of the world that we're in. So these are all part of that forest
Love that.
bathing experience.
Yeah. Plus, people say, well, go out and bathe in the sun because the sun has, healthy rays. One of the things the sun gives off is near infrared. But the leaves actually, they retain near infrared. So, and near infrared is light, and light is really is what gets our blood system flowing, and our cells moving more when they receive light. But near infrared light we don't see, and yet it can come from on a cloudy day, come from the leaves in the forest. So there's so much. I'm so happy to talk with you because you understand why we need not only to have our forests but to participate with them.
I think we need to come to an understanding, a deeper understanding of how we're all interconnected. And I think spending time in nature can help us, can bring us back to that sense we maybe had 20, 30, 10,000 years ago when we lived in nature, when we were hunter and gatherers, when we had a completely different animistic understanding of the world around us, and that world was a part of us and we were a part of it. And I think we've lost that critical, vibrant connection. And
Right. We don't read it the same as we used to. And one way to read it also is to watch animals in the forest and how they behave. And then they teach us things about the forest that we might not be noticing.
absolutely, because they have a whole different way of perceiving and understanding and are much more integrated in their environments than we are.
Right. Yeah. It's I love the sophistication of it all that humans are lacking. That, we can talk about it, but it's just we're not part of this greater exchange of knowledge and sensing that goes on between the trees and plants and and roots and fungi and how they all work together so beautifully.
But we can be. We
Well,
can.
we're learning.
We're learning. And the learning involves a lot of unlearning, right? So obviously we have well-developed linear minds and we understand duality as a starting point. And we can, if we move beyond some of those cognitive biases that have worked well in many ways, but have also hampered our understanding and open ourselves up to new ways or maybe old ways of seeing and perceiving, we can have it all.
Oh, I love that. And we will. I really, I'm optimistic about the future. And actually, it's springtime here, and it's more of a feeling of optimism as it gets warmer and the trees are getting greener.
It's bouncing out, nature's just bouncing out, and it's pretty hard not to be joyful around that.
Yeah, much better than winter. So, Judith Polish, I'm so glad that we're talking, and your book is Why Can't We Be More Like Trees? So people should enjoy it the way I have. And do you have a website?
Yeah, I do. It's cuttingyourcarbonfootprint.com. I'm also a climate change journalist. I read a column for the Albuquerque Journal, so a lot of my articles are on the website, and information on my book is too. So it's cuttingyourcarbonfootprint.com, no spaces, just just like that. And that'll take you to my website. You can find out about the book. You can re-listen to this interview. You can find out about my columns, print them, use them in whatever way you'd like to.
Yeah, it's fascinating, this subject matter. I'm so glad to be able to explore this subject matter with you because, what do I know? I'm not a forest expert and I don't have the scope that you have. So I'm so glad to receive the information that you have.
Thank you. And I'm not really an expert. I'm just someone who loves nature and is very curious.
Well, maybe people can be experts about different parts of it, but I
Yeah,
don't know that anybody can be an expert about the grandiosity of it. So thank you, Judith. I'm so glad to talk with you again.
nice to see you again, Peter.
All the best. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.live. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River, HEART river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.